The Life of Dwight L. Moody. Chapter 4, being read by Peter John Parisi, also known as Brian Dean. In Business in Chicago. I have always been a man of impulse, Mr. Moody once said to the writer. Almost everything I ever did in my life that was a success was done on the impulse, and I suppose when I get ready to die, I will be up and off. In seeking his fortune in the West, he displayed this characteristic impulsiveness. For some months he had fretted under the conservative methods of the business house in which he was engaged, and had longed to enter a larger sphere of activity. And when a crisis finally came in his relations with his employer, and there seemed little opportunity for advancement, he decided to go to Chicago. Fearing that this change would not be approved by his family, he thought it wise not to consult with them on the subject, and their first news of it was in a letter written from the western city 1,000 miles away. For all these years the mother had striven to keep her little family near her, as if, with that unreasoning conceit of mothers which makes their love unique because it is a law unto itself, she could not have guarded her sons from all evil, and watched over them with the same solicitude as in babyhood. That 1,000 miles in Chicago seemed a cruel distance to her, and it was a long time before her heart became reconciled. During the succeeding years, she followed her son's course with her prayers, and when the neighbors noted how, on winter evenings, Widow Moody, lights burned late, they knew she was praying for her son far away. Young Moody arrived in Chicago in the early autumn of 1856. At first, he encountered the same difficulty in securing employment which had so tried his fortitude 2 years before in Boston. In 2 days, however, he secured a position that promised greater opportunities than the one he left, and from the first his energy and keen business judgment were rewarded by a steady increase in responsibility and income. The same earnest Christian spirit that had shown itself in Boston dominated his life in Chicago, and on his arrival, as his letters prove, he promptly associated himself with Christian people. Writing to his mother under date of September 25, 1856, he says, quote, I reached this far-famed city of the West one night ago today. I went into a prayer meeting last night, and as soon as I made myself known, I had friends. After meeting, they came to me and seemed to be as glad to see me as if I were their earthly brother. God is the same here as he is in Boston, and in him I can find peace. Unquote. Having placed his letter from the Mount Vernon Church with the Plymouth Church, of which Reverend J.E. Roy, D.D., was then pastor, Moody began to cast about for some definite Christian service. Remembering, it may be, his success in childhood as a recruiting agent for the Sunday School at Northfield, he conceived the idea that he had a special talent for this work, and at once hired a pew, which he undertook to fill every Sunday. He would hail young men on the street corners, or visit their boarding houses, or even call them out of saloons to share his pew. Whether the novelty of the invitation, or the irresistible earnestness and cordiality of the young man induced a large number to attend, the object was at any rate attained, and before long he was renting 4 pews, which he filled every Sunday with his strangely assorted guests. The great religious revival that swept over the country in 1856 had reached to Chicago, and young Moody heartily enjoyed the opportunities and blessings it brought. Writing to his mother under date of January 6, 1857, he expressed great delight in the interest that was awakened, inducing the phrases current at the time. I have nothing to write that will interest you, unless it is that there is a great revival of religion in this city, he says. I go to meeting every night. Oh, how I do enjoy it. It seems as if God was here himself. Oh, Mother, pray for us. Pray that this work may go on until every knee is bowed. I wish there could be a revival in Northfield, that many might be brought into the fold of Christ. Oh, Mother, keep the family away from the spiritualist meetings, for I am afraid they may be led astray. How did you spend New Year's and Christmas? Oh, Mother, I pray that this year may be the happiest of your life. It has commenced well with me. Hope it will continue. Uncle Calvin urged me to come down and see him Christmas or New Year's, but could not leave business. Now, Mother, please excuse this short letter, and write soon. To this letter there is an amusing postscript indicating how readily this young man, under 20 years of age, had acquired the spirit of the place. Mother, you said in your letter that you were glad to hear that I was getting such good pay. I think you did not understand me, for I did not say I got that amount, but that I could make it soon. If I should build a house out here, that would cost me $100. I could rent it for $75 a year. That is making money. That is, if I was able to do it, you know. Soon after his entering Whitwall's boot and shoe house, a jobbing department was added to the business, which gave his ability still greater opportunities to display itself. He would carefully watch the depots and hotel registers for possible customers from neighboring towns, and took pride in making bigger and larger sales than his fellow clerks. It was his ambition at the time to be worth $100,000, a fortune in those days. His early training had endured him to hardship and had taught him the strictest economy, so that he seemed in a fair way to reach his goal in a reasonable short time. His success as a salesman in the city store so commended him to his employer that he was soon sent out to represent the firm as a commercial traveler. In this capacity, he had many exciting experiences. On one occasion, in order to reach a newly settled frontier town, Mr. Moody had to hire a pair of livery horses to make the trip. All went well until, in driving down a steep hill, the holdback straps were soon to be too loose, allowing the wheels of the carriage to strike the horses' heels. The team immediately became unmanageable and bolted. So long as the driver could keep them in the road, all was well. But when at last they dashed out to the roadway, into a track that had been recently cleared of heavy timber, it required unusual nerve power and physical strength to guide them safely. In telling this story years after, Mr. Moody used to say that it was the most exciting ride he had ever had. Standing up in the buggy with his hat gone and my hair on end, I was just about to dodge the huge stumps and get my team back into the road, where at last a steep hill damped the ardor of the horses. To the duties of a commercial traveler there was added in those days the work of a collector. When the rumor was circulated that any firm was likely to fail, every creditor immediately sent his representatives to collect as quickly as possible the amount that was due him, an assignment in which all creditors share equally, if a practice of later date. On one such occasion, Moody was sent to a neighboring town late on Saturday afternoon to collect a debt from a shoe dealer whose credit was under suspicion. There was one other firm to which the country merchant was deeply indebted, and Moody discovered their representative on the train. Now it was against Moody's principles to travel on Sunday, and he had planned to spend Sundays somewhere en route and start on again early Monday morning. The other collector was not hampered by such scruples, and intended to arrive Sunday and secure his claim early on Monday morning. Where a principal was involved, Moody would never hesitate, but his business pride made it hard for him to see his competitor win so easily, and he determined to do what he could to gain an even chance. In those early days of railway travel, through service was not common, changes being frequent. At one of these changes, Moody got his companion to take a walk with him, and succeeded in holding his attention and conversation until he lost his train, with the result that the claims were equal on equal term on the same day. In a letter house written at the time, he said, "I suppose you would like to know how I am doing. Well, I am doing first rate. Shall be on there in the summer, if not before. I came very near going last week. A man offered to pay my way if I would go with him to buy some goods, but Mr. Whitwall was so driven for help that he could not spare me. I should like to come back to the Bay State once more. Things don't look out here as they do in Boston. A good many of the stores are kept open on the Sabbath day. It is a great holiday out here." In another letter he writes, "I have made $30 a week ever since I came out here. Don't let Uncle Sam get a hold of it, but as it has turned out, I have done the very best thing in coming. My expenses are high, but I can make more money than in Boston. I will send you a bill of fare of the house where I board, and then you can judge whether I shall starve or not. I can make more money here in a week than I could in Boston in a month. He writes to his brother George at the time. But that is not all. I find the better I live, the more enjoyment I have, and the more I think of God and His love, the less I think of the world's troubles. George, don't let anything keep you from the full enjoyment of God's love. I think we have things sometimes come upon us to try our faith, and God likes to see us cling on. As the psalmist says in one place, God likes to chastise them whom He loves. So let us pray for each other. I have brought you before God in my prayers, and I hope you have done the same for me. The many temptations of city life appealed strongly to the ambitious young man, but realizing them fully, he was always on his guard. The following letter, written to his mother in the spring of 1858, illustrates how keenly he felt his situation at the time. I have a good position, and I mean to work my cards to make it better. I have been very successful so far, and if nothing happens, I shall do well. Luther, his brother, thought it was very foolish in leaving Whitwalls, but I have got a situation that is worth 5 of that. If I have my health and my God is with me, I shall succeed better here in Chicago than I ever thought. Mother, I hope you will not forget to pray for your son here in the West, surrounded by temptations on all sides. I never worked in a place since my conversion where there were so many young men as here. I hope you will plead with God that I may live a consistent Christian before them. I am in hope to live so before them that I may succeed in winning their souls to Christ. Pray for me, dear mother. Mention should be made of the good influence of Moody's landlady, Mother Phillips, as she was commonly called. Her hearty sympathy was a help that he always deeply appreciated. The friendships he formed in her house at this time with other young men who, like himself, were just beginning their careers in the Western metropolis, lasted to the end of his life. Among the number were men whose names have since become prominent, not only as foremost citizens of Chicago, but as some of the most successful men of the country, including Edward Isham, Norman Williams, Levi Leiter, General George Smith, General John Thompson, Benjamin Page, William Seward. In speaking of his early friend, Mr. Isham, said recently, Moody was an extremely earnest, active, and forceful man, strenuous in all his activities, but he was at the same time a broad-minded, generous-hearted, affectionate man, dear to all who knew him. He was the same in early days as latter, and every one of the circle remained fond of him to the very end, no matter how much he differed from him in opinion. As an illustration of the way in which Mr. Moody continually had the spiritual welfare of his friends on his mind, one of them recently related the following incident. The last time I saw him was at the funeral of a common friend. After services, he went back to his hotel. After the services, he went back to his hotel and wrote a 4-page letter to me with sentences heavily underscored, following his usual line of thought. The letter was one of his efforts to pluck me out of the burning, in which I supposed he considered me a brand.